Imagine, for a second, standing on the beaches of Normandy, gearing up for a massive all-or-nothing offensive. Or picture looking out over the untamed frontier of the Wild West, getting ready to build an entirely new civilization from scratch. That's exactly the kind of monumental shift we are talking about today. When a high-tech company tries to cross the gap from its early adopters to the mainstream market, it is nothing short of an invasion. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're breaking down the ultimate battle plan for crossing that chasm. We'll look at how you launch the external invasion to secure market share, and honestly, just as importantly, how you survive the painful internal transformation that absolutely has to follow. So, here is our battle plan for the day. First up, arranging distribution channels. Second, transitioning to fulfillment channels. Third, distributor-oriented pricing. And finally, the internal transformation from pioneers to settlers. To guide our strategy, we're pulling our insights straight out of Jeffrey A. Moore's brilliant revised edition of Crossing the Chasm. If you're in tech, you know this book. It's famous because it finally gave us a definitive vocabulary for the structural market problems that have literally caused untold grief for high-tech enterprises. By externalizing the problem, Moore hands us a real blueprint for survival. So let's jump right into one of the most critical structural problems of all: distribution. Let's start with Section 1, arranging distribution channels. Okay, this is where so many companies stumble right out of the gate. You have to realize that not all channels are created equal. They are structurally optimized for entirely different things, and grasping that is step 1 to establishing your mainstream foothold. Basically, we have 3 main types of channels. First, you have demand creators, like a direct sales force. They are heavily optimized for going out, hustling, and generating brand new business. Second, you have demand fulfillers. Think retail superstores or internet marketplaces. They are optimized for a low-cost position, basically just taking orders efficiently once the demand is already there. And third, you've got whole product providers, like systems integrators, who make their money by building out a complete, customized solution for the buyer. So what's the deadly trap here? Well, a lot of channels try to do both creation and fulfillment. They get caught in the middle, they aren't optimized for either, and they suffer the consequences. So what is the end game here? In a chasm crossing scenario, your ultimate target is reaching a high-volume channel. Think of it like finally getting your car into high gear on the highway. Low-cost, low-service channels are optimized for huge volumes, meaning they are absolutely fantastic for boom times and rapid growth. But the big question is, how do we get the car up to speed so we can actually shift into that high gear safely? Which brings us right to Section 2, transitioning to fulfillment channels. It's one thing to know that your final destination is a high-volume retail environment, but it's a whole different beast actually getting there. The crucial point here is this very specific 2-step dance. Step 1, you absolutely must use your own direct sales force to create the initial demand and penetrate that target segment. Basically, you have to start the fire yourself. Why? Because time, not cost, is your most critical success factor right now. You can't afford to waste a single day, and frankly, no outside channel has any vested interest in selling your stuff until you've proven people actually want to buy it. Then, once you've sparked that awareness and established some leadership, you execute step 2, seamlessly transitioning the product over to the most efficient fulfillment channel to handle the incoming massive volume. But watch out, because there's a really dangerous discontinuity in the channel spectrum. Since your product will ultimately end up in retail, there is an upper limit to its price point, usually a few $1,000s for a consumer, maybe up to $10 grand for a small business. But direct sales? That usually requires a massive price tag, around $75,000, just to justify the expensive labor of the sales team. That massive gap between $10,000 and $75,000? That's a dead zone. It's a space where retail can't support the required service, and direct sales simply can't justify the effort. Let's move on to Section 3, distributor-oriented pricing. Once you've navigated those channels, you need to arm your troops by thinking about pricing in a radically different way. There is a very stark contrast between vendor-oriented pricing, which focuses inward on things like your cost of goods, your overhead, and your promised returns to investors, and distribution-oriented pricing, which is entirely focused outward. The source text makes this crystal clear. Vendor-oriented pricing is quite literally the worst possible basis for pricing during the chasm period. Instead, you've got to shift entirely to distribution-oriented pricing. Your main goal right now isn't immediate maximum profit. It's securing ongoing access to the mainstream market by building incredibly strong relationships with your channels. To actually pull off that external focus, you have to perfectly balance 2 huge questions for your channel partners. First, is it priced to sell? Meaning you want to make sure the price point doesn't become a massive wall of resistance for cautious, pragmatic customers. But here's the tension. You also have to ask, is it worthwhile to sell? If you price it too low to keep customers happy, you strip away the channel's margin. Remember, you're asking these channels to go completely out of their way to take on a novelty product. You have to build in a high enough reward to make this way more attractive than just doing their business as usual. And that brings us to this incredibly bold strategy. Moore says you want to set pricing at the market leader price point and build a disproportionately high reward for the channel into the price margin. You are essentially creating a massive, irresistible financial lure for the distributor. The real beauty of this approach is that, over time, as your product becomes truly established and competitors start fighting for the right to distribute it, that artificially high reward will just naturally phase itself out. Finally, we reach Section 4, Internal Transformation, Pioneers to Settlers. Now, let's pivot from the external market to the inside of your own office. Surviving the mainstream requires a painful internal evolution. In the early days, your company's lifeblood is its pioneers. These folks push the technological edge. They want to do great deeds, but they despise infrastructure. The source even explicitly notes they hate to document things. Their raw brilliance fuels the early market. But surviving the mainstream? That requires settlers. Settlers institutionalize things. They build fences. They write standard operating procedures. This shift creates massive internal friction. We're talking literal range wars between your brilliant rule breakers and your necessary rule makers. So why are these settlers so absolutely critical to post-chasm success? It comes down to this single overriding truth. Pragmatists abhor surprises. Your brand new mainstream customers, they value reliability, predictability, and stability above literally everything else. They do not want the chaotic brilliance of a pioneer. They want the steady, highly documented, procedural assurance of a settler. We can actually map this whole organizational shift out chronologically. In Phase 1, the early chasm, all the power is concentrated in the hands of a few Top Gun salespeople and visionary product managers. But as we move into Phase 2, the mid-chasm, there has to be a gradual dissemination of that authority. By Phase 3, when you are securely in the post-chasm mainstream, power is fully distributed to specialized major account managers and industry marketing managers. Now, this institutionalization ultimately frustrates your pioneers. It limits their quick decision-making, and eventually it just makes them want to leave. And as incredibly hard as it is to accept, allowing them to move on is actually a necessary part of the maturation process. Which leaves us with this final, crucial question to reflect upon regarding your own teams right now. Is your organization currently led by pioneers who are getting restless and ready to move on to the next big thing? Or is it firmly in the hands of settlers who are ready to build the infrastructure you need for mainstream dominance? Understanding exactly where your company stands in this internal transformation might just be the deciding factor in successfully navigating your own chasm. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into more strategic framework, and I'll catch you in the next one.